My name is Serafina Croft, and for most of my life, I have been a ghost in my own family's story. They never said the word disappointment out loud. They didn't have to. It was in the gentle, pitying way my mother would pat my hand at family dinners, her eyes full of a sorrow reserved for things that didn't quite turn out right. It was in the air, thick and heavy with unspoken comparisons, whenever my brother, Leo, walked into a room. I was the daughter who chose a camera over a scalpel, the one who found solace in the quiet solitude of nature instead of the glittering hum of a boardroom. I was the one who, after a decade of building a name for myself as a wildlife photographer, a job that took me to the most remote and dangerous corners of the world, came home to find I was still just the quiet, artistic child who hadn't amounted to much. I didn't go to law school. I didn't marry into a family whose name appeared in the society pages. I didn't have a portfolio of stocks or a corner office with a view of the city skyline. Leo did. He was a brilliant investment banker, the pride of the Croft family, his life a meticulously curated collection of successes. Every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday brunch became a quiet celebration of his achievements, while my own were treated as quaint, curious hobbies. "Oh, Serafina just got back from the Amazon," my father would say, a note of confused amusement in his voice. "Took pictures of birds, I think." But what they never understood was that the wilderness had shaped me in ways they couldn't see. I learned to be patient, to sit for days in perfect stillness, waiting for a single, fleeting moment of truth. I learned to read the signs, to see the storm before it broke, to understand that the most beautiful things were often the most fragile, and the most dangerous were often the most silent. I carried that stillness within me, a quiet strength they mistook for weakness. And so I became invisible. Until one evening, at a charity auction I had been guilted into attending, Leo's mentor, a titan of industry named Donovan Crane, turned to me. We were making small talk, the kind that schemes the surface of things, when a photograph came up for auction, a stunning, stark image of a snow leopard against a backdrop of the Himalayas. Donovan's eyes, sharp and discerning, narrowed on my face. "That's your work, isn't it?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, surprised he'd even know. He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "The K2 Expedition 2019. You were the one who found the injured climber. The one who stayed with him for 2 days in a blizzard until the rescue team arrived." The polite chatter around us seemed to fade. I could feel Leo's stare, my parents' confused blinking. Donovan's voice rose, not in anger, but in profound respect. He told me the only thing that kept him alive was the quiet humming of the woman who refused to leave his side. "That was you." The auctioneer's gavel hung in the air. Leo's face was a mask of disbelief. "She saved my friend's life," Donovan said, his voice resonating through the sudden silence. "And I heard she was awarded the International Photographer of the Year prize for that series. A prize that came with a $50,000 grant." "You never mentioned that, Leo." That was the moment. The quiet click of a shutter, capturing a truth that had been out of focus for far too long. My name is Serafina Croft, and for years I let my family's narrative define me. I let their silence eclipse my light. But today, I'm developing the full story, because living in the shadows didn't protect me, it only taught me how to fade. Before I share it all, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a simple hello in the comments or tell me what part of the world you're reading from. I want to see how far this story can travel. And if it resonates with you, please consider subscribing. Your presence here is a light in the dark. Thank you. And now, let me take you back to the beginning. The world had narrowed to a circle of white. The blizzard on K2 wasn't just snow, it was a living entity, a screaming, clawing beast that devoured sound and sight. My tent was a fragile membrane against the gale, the fabric groaning under the weight of the wind. I'd been tracking the snow leopard for 3 days, but the storm had trapped us all. On the second morning, through a momentary lull, I heard a sound that didn't belong, a faint, human cry. I found him half buried in a snowdrift, his leg bent at an impossible angle. He was a climber from another expedition, separated from his group. His name was Daniel, and his breath came in shallow, frosty puffs. I got him into my tent, wrapped him in every spare layer I had, and melted snow for him to drink. For 2 days and 2 nights, we waited. I had a satellite phone with a dying battery, just enough to transmit our coordinates and a desperate plea for help. To keep him from slipping into the fatal sleep of hypothermia, I talked. I told him stories about my childhood, about the birds in my grandmother's garden. And when I ran out of words, I hummed old lullabies, half-remembered melodies. I didn't know if anyone was coming. All I knew was that I would not let this man die alone in the vast, indifferent whiteness. When the rescue helicopter finally broke through the clouds, it felt like a miracle. I watched them airlift Daniel to safety, his hand weakly raised in a wave. I stayed behind to pack my gear, my own exhaustion a heavy cloak. The photograph I took in the moments after the storm cleared, of the elusive snow leopard finally appearing on a ridge against the raw, majestic peaks, was the one that won the award. It was a picture born of terror and tenacity, of life clinging on at the edge of the world. I spent 3 weeks after that recovering in a small clinic in Skardu, dealing with frostbite on my fingers and toes. I learned to hold a cup of tea again, the warmth a strange and welcome sensation. By the time I could feel my own hands properly, I knew that a part of me would always remain on that mountain. I came home to Portland, to the gentle rain and the familiar scent of pine, and I didn't tell a soul. I accepted the award via a crackly video call and had the prize money wired to a savings account I never touched. No fanfare, no celebration. I just went back to my quiet life. Now I live in a small cottage nestled in the woods outside the city. I lead photography workshops for at-risk youth, teaching them how to find beauty in the overlooked corners of their own world. It's simple, meaningful work. No one here knows my photograph hangs in a gallery in London. No one knows about the blizzard, or Daniel, or the $50,000 grant that sits untouched, gathering digital dust. I never told my family. What would have been the point? To them, I am Serafina, the sister who plays with a camera, the daughter who never quite landed. The one who shows up to family events in practical boots and a hand-knitted sweater, smelling faintly of cedar and rain. Leo, my younger brother, is the sun around which our family orbits. Leo Croft, vice president at Crane and Sterling, on the fast track to a partnership. He's charismatic, impeccably dressed, his laughter echoing with the confidence of a man who has never known failure. My father's chest puffs out when he speaks of him. My mother updates her social media with every new promotion, every charity gala he attends. In the meticulously framed family portraits that line their hallway, I am always on the edge, slightly out of focus, the person they introduce with a gentle sigh, and this is our daughter, Serafina. She's an artist. Last week, my mother called. No preamble, just Serafina. Dear, are you still doing that nature walk thing with the teenagers? I teach photography workshops, Mom, I said, my voice even. She laughed, a light, tinkling sound. Well, that's lovely. I'm sure they have a wonderful time taking pictures of squirrels. I didn't correct her. I've learned that arguing is like trying to photograph the wind. You can feel it, but you can never capture it. That night, before I went to sleep, I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Tucked beneath a pile of hand-woven blankets was a small, velvet-lined box. Inside lay a simple, elegant medal, and beside it, a printed copy of the award announcement. The photograph in the article always gives me pause. It's a candid shot taken by the rescue team. Me, kneeling by the tent, my face raw from the wind, hair matted with ice, my eyes looking not at the camera, but towards the distant peaks where the leopard had been. I looked exhausted, broken, and profoundly alive. I traced the outline of my own face, then gently closed the lid. It felt like closing a door on a room no one else ever entered. The next morning, my phone chimed. A group text from my mother. Leo has just been appointed to the board of the Children's Health Foundation. We're having a celebratory dinner at the Clove Club on Saturday. Please dress appropriately, Serafina. And try to mingle. I started to type a reply, I don't think I can make it, but my finger hovered over the send button. Then I deleted it. The restaurant smelled of roasted fennel and quiet ambition. It was one of those places with muted lighting and waiters who moved with the silent grace of ghosts. The entire Croft clan was there, gleaming and polished, their conversations a soft symphony of stock prices and summer homes in the Hamptons. Leo was the conductor, standing by the head of the table, accepting congratulations with an easy, practiced charm. I found my seat at the far end, a little island of solitude, my simple black dress feeling like a whisper in a room of declarations. Before I could even unfold my napkin, my Uncle Henry leaned over, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. Serafina, good to see you. Tell me, what is it you're up to these days? Still chasing butterflies with that camera? He chuckled, and a few others at our end of the table joined in. It wasn't malicious, just the casual, dismissive humor they'd always used with me. A paper cut, not a stab wound. I run a mentorship program for young people in Portland, I said, my smile calm and unwavering. We use photography to help them build confidence and find their voice. He blinked, as if processing a foreign language. Ah, how noble. He turned away, the conversation moving on without me. When they brought out the dessert, a towering confection of sponge sugar and chocolate filigree for Leo, everyone applauded. As they snapped photos with their phones, my mother leaned in close, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Just let Leo have the spotlight tonight, dear. No talk of, well, you know, your travels. It can make people feel a bit uncomfortable. I stared at the candle flames dancing on the cake, my reflection wavering in the polished silver. I simply nodded. Later that night, back in my cottage, the scent of damp earth and old books a welcome comfort, I pulled the small, fire-resistant safe from my closet. I keyed in the combination and opened it. The bank statement was inside, the numbers crisp and clear, $50,000. A grant from the International Photography Guild for exceptional courage and artistic integrity in photojournalism. I had never spent a single dollar. My modest income from the workshops and the occasional sale of a print was enough. It paid my mortgage, bought my groceries, and funded the camera equipment for the kids in my program. There was no public ceremony, no trophy on my mantle. When the Guild invited me to the awards gala in London, I'd politely declined, citing a prior commitment. It was easier than explaining the nightmares, the phantom sensation of cold that still crept into my fingers on warm days, the way the sound of a strong wind could still make my heart seize in my chest. No one had called during my recovery. Not my mother, not my father. Leo had sent a perfunctory email. Heard you had a bit of trouble on the mountain. Hope you're all right. Let me know when you're back in civilization. I never replied. The only person I'd spoken to was Isla, a fellow photographer I'd met in Patagonia years ago. She was a force of nature herself, a woman who understood the language of silence and survival. When I told her what happened, her only response was, "You didn't just survive a blizzard, Serafina. You stared it down and made it blink." I think that's why I called her. She saw the strength, not the fragility. Tonight, after the dinner, I went to the small darkroom I'd built in my shed. Pinned to the wall was a collage of photos taken by my students. A close-up of a dandelion pushing through a crack in the pavement. The reflection of a smiling face in a puddle. A blurry, joyful shot of a dog catching a frisbee. Taped to the bottom was a card, the handwriting messy and earnest. "Thanks for teaching us how to see the good stuff, Miss C." I smiled, a real smile this time. They hadn't meant it as anything profound, but in that moment, it felt like everything. Leo never called. Not for a real conversation. He'd forward articles about finance, tag me in family photos on social media. Once he even sent a gif of a cat typing on a laptop. But an actual phone call, where my name appeared on the screen and he was on the other end, just to talk to me? It hadn't happened in years. So when his name flashed on my phone a week after the dinner, I let it ring twice before answering, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. "Hey," he said, his tone breezy, as if we'd spoken yesterday. "Got a proposition for you." He didn't wait for a response. Crane and Sterling is sponsoring a big charity auction next month for the Children's Health Foundation. It's a huge deal. I thought you might want to come. I paused. Why? He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Well, you're into art and all that. Might be your scene. And Dad mentioned you should probably get out more, wear a nice dress for a change. There it was. The hook hidden inside the bait. Then he added, Donovan will be there, of course. My mentor. So, try to make a good impression. I'll think about it, I said, and then spent the next 3 weeks trying to find a reason not to go. But on the day of the auction, I found myself standing in front of my closet. I pushed past the sensible sweaters and comfortable flannels and pulled out a simple, elegant, deep emerald gown I'd bought for a gallery opening once and never worn. It wasn't for him. It wasn't for them. It was for me. A quiet acknowledgement that I, too, could belong in that world, even if I chose not to live in it. The ballroom was a sea of glittering jewels and champagne flutes, the air humming with the low thrum of wealth and influence. I stayed near the back, observing, my photographer's instinct taking over. And then a man approached the silent auction tables, a man with silver hair and eyes that held the quiet wisdom of someone who had seen both the boardroom and the brink. He paused in front of a photograph, a beautiful, haunting landscape of the Patagonian wilderness. He glanced at the artist's name, then his eyes scanned the room and landed on me. He walked over, his expression one of dawning recognition. Serafina Croft, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I nodded slowly. I'm Donovan Crane, he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, respectful. I was a friend of Daniel Thorne, the climber you saved on K2. I don't know if he ever got the chance to tell you, but you didn't just save his life. You saved his family from a world of grief. My breath caught in my throat. No one had ever said it like that. No one had ever acknowledged the ripple effect of that single act of humanity. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I've wanted to meet you for years. To say thank you on his behalf. On mine. My throat felt too tight to speak, so I just nodded, a wave of emotion washing over me that I hadn't expected. An hour later, as the live auction began, I found a spot near a large pillar, content to be an observer. Leo was at the head table, seated next to Donovan and our parents. I expected nothing. I wanted nothing. Then, Donovan Crane was invited to the stage to say a few words. He spoke eloquently about philanthropy, about responsibility, about the work of the foundation. But then he paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd until it found me. Tonight, we celebrate those who give generously from their wealth, he said, his voice steady. But I want to take a moment to honor a different kind of generosity. A generosity of spirit. He raised a hand and gestured toward me, not with a grand flourish, but with a simple, direct motion. Serafina Croft is here with us tonight. In 2019, during a blizzard on K2, she rescued a fellow climber, a dear friend of mine, and stayed with him for 2 days until help arrived. She never sought recognition. She never told her story. The room grew so quiet you could hear the ice shifting in 1,000 glasses. For a photograph she took in the aftermath of that ordeal, she was awarded the International Photographer of the Year prize and a $50,000 grant, he continued, his voice ringing with conviction. I believe she has never touched that money, because for some people, the value of an act isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the quiet dignity of doing what is right, and then carrying on. I felt the weight of every gaze in that room land on me. Leo's face was pale, his confident smile gone. My mother's hand was frozen halfway to her mouth. My father looked utterly bewildered. I didn't hide. I didn't shrink. I simply stepped out from behind the pillar, just enough to be seen. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just offered a small, single nod. I hadn't come here seeking the spotlight, but now that the truth had found me, I would not be ashamed of the light. After Donovan's speech, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. The air, once filled with smooth, easy chatter, now crackled with whispers and sideways glances. I didn't have to hear the words to understand their meaning. It was a cocktail of curiosity, admiration, and, for those who knew me, utter confusion. Their version of me had just been shattered, and they were scrambling to piece together a new one. Leo approached me first, his face a mixture of shock and a strange, calculating flicker I'd never seen before. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice a low hiss. "A $50,000 grant? Serafina, do you have any idea what that could do for my portfolio?" I looked at him, my gaze level. "It was never about the money, Leo." Then my mother was there, her hand gripping my arm, her voice a breathless, urgent whisper. $50,000? Is that true? Serafina, why would you keep that from us? From your father and me. I offered her the simplest truth I had. Because for 15 years, every accomplishment I've had has been treated like a quaint little hobby. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her, her eyes wide with an astonishment that was, for the first time, not directed at Leo. That night, the phone rang. It was her again. "Darling, we were just so surprised. Proud, of course. We're so proud. Everyone is talking about it. Your aunt just called. She said she saw an article online. Why don't you come for brunch on Sunday? Leo will be there. We want to celebrate you, properly. It's time we came together as a family." Her voice was too bright, too eager. A part of me, the small, hopeful child that still lived somewhere deep inside, wanted to believe her. So, against my better judgment, I said yes. On Sunday, I pulled my old Subaru into my parents' pristine driveway. A banner, hand-painted in garish gold letters, was strung across the porch. "Welcome home, our hero." Inside, the house smelled of my mother's famous cinnamon rolls. There were fresh flowers on the dining table, and the entire family was dressed in their Sunday best. Leo pulled out a chair for me at the head of the table, smiling. "You should do more interviews, he said. "This story has legs. It's good for the family name." It almost sounded like a compliment. Almost. Then my mother sat down, her hands clasped together on the table. "You do still have the grant money, don't you, dear? We were just thinking. Leo has this incredible idea for a new ethical investment fund. It's for a good cause, of course. It just needs a little seed money to get started. A small contribution from you." My fork stilled over my plate. I looked from my mother's pleading face to my brother's expectant one. Leo jumped in, his voice smooth as silk. "Look, I get it. You kept it a secret for your own reasons. But we're family. You don't have to carry these burdens alone anymore." I set my fork down gently. "You're right," I said. "It's my burden. Which means it's my decision. It's not a family fund." The warmth in the room evaporated. The rest of the brunch was a strained affair, full of forced smiles and conversations that died in the middle of a sentence. I nodded when I was supposed to, smiled when it was expected. But the cinnamon rolls tasted like ash in my mouth. Later that evening, back in the quiet sanctuary of my cottage, I found a lavish bouquet of white orchids on my doorstep. There was no card, just a small, typed note tucked into the ribbon. "Family is our greatest investment. Don't forget where you belong." My hands trembled. As I lifted the bouquet, another note, this one handwritten on Leo's personal stationery, fell to the floor. "You're a star, Serafina. Let us help you shine." Al. I stood there in the doorway, the scent of the orchids cloying and artificial. This wasn't a celebration. It was a campaign. A strategic, coordinated effort to leverage my story for their gain. And I had walked right into the heart of it. A week later, Leo appeared at my cottage. He didn't knock. He just walked in, using the spare key I'd given my parents years ago for emergencies. He was carrying a bottle of vintage champagne, the kind reserved for closing multi-million-dollar deals. He looked haggard, the polished veneer cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "I need your help," he said, slumping into the worn armchair by the fireplace. I crossed my arms. "More seed money for the ethical fund?" He shook his head, not meeting my eyes. "No. Real trouble. I'm in debt, Serafina. Deep." That got my attention. He looked up, and for the first time in his life, the charismatic mask was gone. I saw pure, undiluted fear. "I owe over $180,000. Bad investments. A private lender. I thought I could make it back on the next deal, but it fell through. If I don't pay them by the end of the month, they'll ruin me. My career, my reputation. They'll go after the family." My throat was dry. "And you want me to give you the $50,000? "It's a start," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I'll pay you back, I swear. As soon as I secure my end-of-year bonus." I held his gaze. "Let me ask you something, Leo. If I wasn't the woman who survived a blizzard on K2, if that grant didn't exist, and I was just your sister who teaches kids to take pictures of squirrels, would you be here right now?" The silence in the room was a confession. He looked away at the dying embers in the fireplace. That was all the answer I needed. "I can't help you," I said softly. His jaw clenched. The desperation in his eyes hardened into something cold and sharp. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice dropping to a low threat. "A hero narrative only lasts so long, Serafina. One wrong move, and you're just the selfish sister who let her family burn." He left the champagne on the table, unopened. A silent, bitter monument to our broken bond. I sat there for a long time after he left, the quiet of the woods pressing in on me. My mind was a whirlwind of guilt, anger, and a strange, painful clarity. Helping him would mean betraying the very resilience that award represented. Not helping him felt like watching him drown. But hadn't he been sinking for years, weighed down by his own ambition? The next day, the calls began. It was a coordinated, relentless assault. A woman from my mother's garden club called, gushing about my bravery before pivoting to a pitch for a community beautification project that needed a founding patron. My Uncle Henry called with a can't-miss real estate opportunity that just needed a small, initial investment. A distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in a decade messaged me about his new tech startup. They all started with praise. They all called me an inspiration. And they all ended with a number. 10,000. 25,000. 50,000. I sat on the floor of my living room, the wilting orchids drooping in their vase, their sweet scent now sickly and funereal. They didn't see me. They had never seen me. They only saw a dollar sign, a convenient solution to their own problems, wrapped in the shiny packaging of my newfound fame. The text arrived on a Thursday afternoon. It was from my father, which was unusual in itself. "We are having a family meeting on Saturday. Your presence is required." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. A small, foolish part of me wondered if this was it, the moment of reckoning, the chance for a real conversation. I should have known better. I arrived to find the living room arranged like a courtroom. Every available chair was filled with a relative, their faces grim and expectant. And sitting next to my father, a man in a pinstripe suit with a leather briefcase, was a man I'd never seen before. "This is Mr. Wallace," my father said, his voice tight. "He's the family's legal counsel." My stomach plummeted. My Aunt Eleanor began, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Leo is in danger, Serafina. These people he owes money to, they're not just bankers. We've had strange phone calls. We're worried for his safety." One by one, they added to the narrative, painting a picture of my brother as a tragic victim of circumstance. My mother spoke last, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "He's made mistakes, but he's your brother. He's dedicated his life to making this family proud. If this scandal gets out, it will tarnish the Croft name forever. Please, Serafina, think of the family." A cold resolve settled over me. "What about my name?" I asked, my voice quiet but clear. "Has anyone in this room ever worried about protecting it? Or was it only valuable once it came with a cash prize? The room fell silent. I looked at my father, but he was studying a loose thread on the arm of his chair. I took a deep breath. I would offer a bridge, but I wouldn't let them burn it. I will give him $10,000, I said. The room erupted in a collective sigh of relief. On two conditions. Leo, who had been silent until now, looked up. First, he provides proof that he has enrolled in a financial counseling and debt management program. Second, this is the last time anyone in this family ever asks me for money. Ever. My mother's relief curdled into a tight-lipped disappointment. Leo walked over and put a hand on my shoulder, his smile returning. Thank you, Serafina. You're a lifesaver. I'll turn this all around. I nodded but stepped away from his touch. I transferred the money that evening. For 10 days, there was nothing. A blessed, peaceful silence. I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, I had finally drawn a line they would respect. Then I opened a travel magazine I'd subscribed to, and there he was. My brother, Leo Croft, on a full-page spread, grinning from the deck of a yacht in Monaco. The caption read, "Investment Guru Leo Croft on the importance of calculated risks and living life to the fullest." Beside him, a model-thin woman laughed, her arm draped around him. Another photo showed him at a casino in Monte Carlo, a mountain of chips in front of him. I stared at the glossy page, the betrayal of physical blow. He hadn't just broken his promise. He had monetized it, turning his lies into a lifestyle brand. I called him. The call went straight to voicemail. I texted him. Congratulations on the yacht. I assume my $10,000 helped with the down payment. Then I blocked his number. I blocked his social media. I blocked him from my life, not with anger, but with the quiet finality of a chapter ending. He would be back, I knew, with another story, another crisis. But this time, I had to choose my own peace over his chaos. It began subtly, a ripple in the digital water. A comment on an old blog post about my work. Too bad she's not as generous with her own family. Then it became a wave. My phone started buzzing, an incessant stream of notifications from strangers. Hypocrite. You save a stranger on a mountain but let your own brother sink? Some hero you are. I traced it back to an anonymous post on a popular financial forum. The title was chilling. My sister, the hero photographer, is hoarding her prize money while our family faces ruin. It was Leo's voice, cloaked in anonymity but dripping with his signature blend of self-pity and entitlement. The post went viral. Within a week, a local gossip columnist had picked it up. My photograph from K2, the one that had been a symbol of resilience, was now plastered next to a headline that read, "From Savior to Selfish, the dark side of a local hero." The consequences were swift and brutal. The youth center where I volunteered asked me to take a step back while they reviewed the situation. Parents pulled their kids from my workshops, their emails full of thinly veiled accusations about my character. I didn't break down. I went home, unlocked the cedar chest, and looked at the medal. This prize wasn't just about a photograph. It was about the 2 days I spent humming to a dying man, the frostbite that still ached in my bones, the quiet courage it took to survive. It was the only tangible proof I had that my life, the one I had chosen, had value. And now, they were trying to poison that too. One night, I was jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass. I crept into my living room to find the window beside my desk broken, a rock lying amidst the shards. My laptop was gone. My external hard drives, containing years of my work, were gone. On my desk, a single piece of paper was weighted down by a spare camera lens. In crude, block letters, it read, "Some assets are meant to be liquidated." I called the police. They took a report, dusted for prints, but there was no sign of forced entry on the doors. They asked if I had any enemies. I knew who it was, but without proof, he was just a ghost. The theft broke something in me the public shaming hadn't. I felt violated, unsafe in my own home. The quiet of the woods, once a comfort, now felt menacing. I jumped at every shadow, every rustle of leaves. The fear was a cold, familiar presence, the same fear I'd felt in the blizzard. But then, it wasn't a storm trying to kill me. It was my own blood. And then, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple, a debt of gratitude. It was from Donovan Crane. We met at a small, unassuming coffee shop in a quiet part of Portland, the kind of place that valued good coffee over trendy decor. Donovan was already there, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. He looked older, more tired than he had at the auction. "Serafina," he said, his voice grave. "I feel partly responsible for all of this. By putting you in the spotlight, I inadvertently painted a target on your back." "You told the truth," I said, my voice flat. "You're not responsible for what they did with it." "Perhaps not," he said. "But I can't stand by and watch this happen." He slid a thick manila folder across the table. It was filled with financial records, text message logs, and a signed affidavit from a former colleague of Leo's. He also placed a small, encrypted flash drive on top. "I heard what Leo was saying, the whispers at the firm," Donovan explained. "It didn't sound right. So I hired a professional to look into it. A private investigator. Everything you need is in that folder." I opened it. My hands trembled as I read. There were bank statements showing my $10,000 transfer being immediately rerouted to an online gambling site. There were screenshots of Leo soliciting investments for a non-existent eco-startup from junior associates at his firm. There was a detailed report of the break-in at my cottage, tracing the sale of my stolen camera equipment to a pawn shop 2 towns over, with security footage of the man who sold it, a man who got into a car registered to Leo Croft. It was all there. Every lie, every betrayal, laid bare in black and white. Donovan's eyes were kind. "We can take this to the authorities. Fraud, theft, defamation. You have more than enough." I looked down at the evidence, at the proof of my brother's calculated cruelty. "If I do this," I whispered, "I'm not just exposing him. I'm setting fire to my entire family." "No," Donovan said gently, his gaze unwavering. "You're not setting the fire, Serafina. You're finally stepping out of the smoke." I took a long, slow breath, the first clean breath I'd felt I'd taken in months. And I nodded. "Okay," I said. "No more hiding in the shadows." That evening, I sat in my quiet living room, the broken window temporarily patched with cardboard. I opened my laptop and created a new post on my professional photography blog. The title was simple: Developing the Truth. I wrote about the blizzard, about the grant, about the extortion and the lies. And I attached a single, password-protected link to a cloud folder containing every document from Donovan's investigation. The password was one word: K2. I hit publish. Within an hour, my phone began to ring. It was a reporter from a national newspaper. The first of many. The fire was lit. The courtroom was a sterile, impersonal space, all polished wood and muted colors. I wore a simple gray dress, my hands resting calmly on the witness stand. I didn't need a lawyer to tell my story. Across the room, Leo sat beside his attorney, looking pale and diminished. Our parents were in the front row, their faces a mask of grief and shame. The reporters who had once sensationalized my betrayal were now scribbling furiously, capturing this new, more complex narrative. The prosecutor laid out the case with methodical precision: the digital trail of the gambling debts, the forged investment proposals, the sworn testimony from Leo's defrauded colleagues. The pawn shop owner identified Leo from a photo lineup as the man who was waiting in the car when my equipment was sold. The ugliest truth came from the audit of his finances. He hadn't just been in debt. He had been funding a lavish lifestyle built on a foundation of lies, using money stolen from friends, junior employees, and, finally, me. My mother was called to testify. She tried to defend him, speaking of the immense pressure he was under, the competitive world he lived in. But when the prosecutor presented her with text messages in which Leo bragged to a friend about how he was handling the family cash cow, she broke down, sobbing into her hands. I didn't know, she wept. I thought we were helping him. I didn't know it was all a lie. When the judge asked me if I wished to make a final statement, I stood and faced my brother. He wouldn't look at me. For years, I began, my voice clear and steady. I believed that keeping quiet was a form of strength, that absorbing the pain would keep the peace. But silence isn't peace. It's a slow, creeping poison. Real peace, real strength, comes from standing in your truth, no matter how much it hurts. I looked at the judge. I don't want my brother's ruin. I want him to have a chance to rebuild, but he can't do that until he is held accountable for what he has broken. Leo was found guilty of fraud and theft. The sentence was not prison, but it was severe. 2 years of probation, mandatory financial and psychological counseling, full restitution to all his victims, and a 5-year ban from the securities industry. As I left the courthouse, the crisp autumn air feeling like a fresh start, a woman approached me. She was from a nonprofit foundation that sponsored arts programs for underserved communities. She had followed my story, she said, and was inspired by my work with the youth workshops. They wanted to offer me a significant grant to expand my program, to build a permanent center. That night, I took the untouched $50,000 from my savings account. I combined it with the grant from the foundation. We called it the K2 Project, a place where young people could learn to frame their own world, to tell their own stories, to find their own light. Winter settled over Portland, blanketing the woods in a quiet layer of snow. The K2 Project was thriving. The new center was a warm, bright space filled with the smell of darkroom chemicals and hopeful energy. The kids who had left were back, along with dozens of new faces. One afternoon, a young girl, shy and quiet, showed me a photo she'd taken, a single, perfect snowflake on a dark wool mitten. "Look, Miss C," she whispered. "It's like a little star." My heart ached with a beautiful, healing pain. Donovan became a regular visitor, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. He'd bring coffee and pastries and sit with me, watching the students work. One day, he handed me a small, wrapped gift. Inside was a vintage silver compass. "So you never lose your way again," he said, his smile gentle. Though I don't think there was ever much danger of that. I took his hand, our fingers lacing together naturally, a quiet promise of a new direction. A letter arrived from my parents. It was short, the handwriting shaky. "We are so sorry, Serafina. We were so focused on the son we wanted to be proud of, we failed to see the daughter we already were." I folded it and put it in the cedar chest, next to the medal. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. The final image of this story isn't of a courtroom or a confrontation. It's me, standing in the snow outside the center, Donovan by my side, watching the students hang their photographs for their first exhibition. One of the boys called out, "Miss C, aren't you cold?" I looked out at the hushed, white landscape, so different from the violent blizzard on the mountain, yet so similar. Sometimes I called back, my breath making a cloud in the air. But you learn that the cold can't hurt you if you build your own fire. Sometimes, you have to walk through the storm to find out what you're made of. Survival isn't just about making it through. It's about what you choose to build in the quiet after the wind dies down. And perhaps the most courageous act of all is to develop your own story, in your own time, and finally see yourself in perfect, honest focus.